everybody, welcome to BrickVault. Today in front of us I get to show you guys a couple of amazing custom-built LEGO Star Wars ships. We have Obi-Wan's Delta 7 or Anakin's Delta 7B, but also better known as the Jedi Starfighters. And they certainly fit that description well. These were the first ships that were ever specifically designed to fit the needs of Jedi pilots. Not only were they incredibly fast and maneuverable, but on top of that, the control consoles on the inside were simplified in a way that gave you a huge amount of manual control that would be dangerous to normal pilots, but incredibly helpful to the force-sensitive ones that could take full advantage of the extra maneuverability and targeting systems. Honestly, there's lots of other really fun, weird, interesting anecdotes about this ship that I'd like to get into later, but first let me talk about the LEGO models. These were designed by the builder Lewis, who also built the AAT, and you can find the instructions at our web store, www.brickvault.toys, if indeed you wanted to try to build these ships for yourself. Included with each purchase is a PDF step-by-step building guide, as well as a digital parts list for quickly uploading all the pieces that you'll need online so you can make those orders for the build. Buying instructions from us is always a great way to help support what we do here at the studio, and it also supports the builders that we work with, like Lewis. Now, straight away, getting into the details, these ships have a deceptive way of looking like an easy to design model, but there are a couple of factors involved that really make it difficult to build at a small size and include lots and lots of details. Number one, getting the correct angle of the wings, if you can even call them that. They have to be built slightly offset in order to look as accurate as possible. And then on top of that, there is a second layer of plate detailing that goes up towards the cockpit at a slightly different angle. It's a little bit sharper, as you can see. They're both canted down, also at different angles, and that just makes a huge amount of interesting and complex connections required underneath. On top of that, both of the Delta 7s, in fact all the Delta 7s, are highly customized ships. They've all got different color combinations in different places. So you'll also notice between both Obi-Wan's and Anakin's, there's like a totally different build style for the front section by the nose. Also, the droid placement is different because you can actually fit a full-size astromech in the Delta 7B. And I am pleasantly surprised with what Lewis was able to do with this model in such a small size. Built to minifig scale, maybe a couple of studs slightly long, it is still one of the smaller iterations of this model that you can find built from LEGO. It is 9 3/4 inches long, 25 centimeters, 4 3/4 inches wide, 12 centimeters, and almost 3 inches high, 7 centimeters. This makes it comparable in size to the rest of the minifig scale ships that we have here in the studio. Doing this comparison shot means I've got to run all over the place inside our warehouse and get all these different models to show you guys how big the Delta 7 and Delta 7B would be in comparison with the rest of the LEGO Star Wars universe, or really the Star Wars universe. Now, one interesting anecdote about the Jedi Starfighter is that it was originally going to be a Stormtrooper Starfighter. At least the concept art had originally assigned the ship for that role, and the idea was that they were supposed to look reminiscent of Star Destroyers. Later, that idea was scrapped, but it is interesting. There are just so many ships in the Star Wars universe that were first meant to act as one thing and then later just reassigned to a different role. I suppose it's worth now taking a look at each of these ships individually. We're going to start off with Obi-Wan's Delta 7. Still one of my favorite spaceship scenes in any movie is when he's getting pursued by Jango Fett through the asteroid field, and even now I think it is probably the best display of what this ship can actually do when put under duress. Lewis, the designer, had a great idea of adding panel pieces on their side towards the front of the ship. That knits the line between either side of the wing together just a little bit closer, which is nice. And then by far one of the more interesting design approaches for this model that really, I think, sets it apart from other LEGO builds is the way the canopy has been integrated with brick-built plates that wrap around it. That works well to illustrate how the canopy almost melts into the sheet metal, and the glass windscreen itself is also canted forward a little bit, which helps to reduce the curve curve in the back, because naturally the back of the glass is pretty flat and flush with the rest of the ship. Ultimately, the look here just works extremely well, and it's my personal favorite bit of building on either of the ships, though Lewis also does employ a pretty fun idea by attaching some of those longer sloped pieces, this time in the lime green, but when you flip the ship upside down, you can see that they're actually studded on a little bit that can rotate, and that just makes the whole slope connection slightly more accurate, just a little bit sleeker and smoother, and it's just a detail that is greatly appreciated. Once again, it's such a small scale. Now that I mentioned the bottom of the ship, we might as well take a look at the whole thing, and this is very much one of those builds that is not lacking at all when it comes to just being complete from every single angle. The two thrusters in the back have a way of almost melting into the side-built bricks, and the sloped plates and panels have a way of keeping this ship flat, yet also breaking away from the edge of the wing to just have a little bit of that dip still work. You'll also notice that there is folding landing gear, and let's get into the functions. The legs on the sides and the back fold down, and there's the 1 foot in the front. These connections are really strong. They're very easy to manipulate. If you press down on the nose, I suppose it can dip forward ever so slightly. And then the only other function is, of course, taking the pilot out of the pilot seat. This is where the custom part of the build sort of departs from what I would say is a normal playset feature. You do have to kind of take a couple of little pieces off in order to get the pilot out, in order to get Obi-Wan out. But if you've built the model, it's not a particularly difficult process. And once he's out of there, there's actually a lot of nice details that you can see a little bit better once the minifigure is gone. The handles are made of pistol pieces. The build for the projection console in the front is pretty fun with that wrench. And on either side of the pilot, there's some nice tile pieces that show off some buttons and panels. Now let's put Obi-Wan back in the seat, and when you look at him through the windscreen, it really does feel very complete. He is completely surrounded by as many control details as you could possibly fit into such a small space. And alright, the last build detail I'm going to talk about for Obi-Wan's ship is the U-shaped symbol on either side of the wing. They're built offset with jumper pieces. That's because you have to have red on both sides of the wing there, and it really is such a small build. I really like the way that Lewis worked this out. And then when you switch over to Anakin's ship, you'll notice that it's totally flat in here, and that's because the color combination, the design, doesn't really call for a detail quite like that. But conversely, you'll also notice that it actually dips down a little bit. That's because you have what look like intakes or heat dispersion areas with a little bit of carbon scoring. That's definitely a really fun way to illustrate this detail. And also, when you jump towards the front, the paint job changes in a pretty dramatic way, and Lewis brick built the whole thing in with slope studs on their side and cheese wedge pieces being cut out from either side of the wing in order to make it match up flush. It's a pretty ambitious approach in order to get extra color details out of a model like this, and personally I'd say it's pretty darn successful. Now the last major difference, of course, is R2-D2 is now completely inside the ship. Of course, it is just his head, but the idea is that an entire astromech body would be sitting here in the front of a Delta 7B, and that's just one of the several different modifications that makes it better than the original. It's got better targeting systems now because of the droid, and I've heard it's got better shields and firepower and other things, but externally the only thing you really need to worry about is the astromech is now based in the center front, right in front of the pilot, and that's how you know it's a little bit newer, a little bit more updated. Now, outside of that, I must admit there really isn't much else different between the actual build design from Obi-Wan's to Anakin's ship, and there's maybe a couple of different little design choices made for the wings, but once again, that's all just color combination choices. And the ships are basically identical in every way outside of that. But let me finish off by showing you guys the handling section of this video. These models, though they look like a pizza slice, aren't like incredibly robust. Usually I like picking them up with two hands. You can, of course, hold the whole thing from behind one hand and swoosh it around. It's not like some super delicate piece, but it is a model that once you handle it, little things might shift around here and there. So when I set it back down, I'm always kind of playing around a little bit with one tile or one plate in one place or another, just to kind of get it to all line up straight again. Frankly, that's it. I mean, honestly, the landing gear folds out just fine. You already saw pilots coming in and out of the ship, and I haven't experienced any types of breaks really with this thing. It's just a little bit loose here and there based on how these connections come together. Thus is the nature of model building. This isn't a difficult piece to handle like at all, but it is one of those models that you will be playing around with a little angle here and there after you pick it up and move it around. Now with that, I think I've said everything I want to say about these custom builds. Remember, if you wanted to build them yourself, you can always check out our web store linked in the description below. Lewis is a rock solid builder, and honestly, the design for the Delta 7 has long been overdue. If you enjoy our content, you can always like or subscribe. Let me know what types of builds you'd like to see as a video in the future. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time at BrickVault.